Hunting. It's an avid hobby of mine and runs in the family. My favorite animals to catch are deer and boars, as they are quite a challenge to catch, and I love a challenge, as well as general hunting. Camping in the woods is therapeutic for me, as you're in nature's natural habitat, which can be greatly enjoyed when by yourself. Accompanying this are the type of people you meet whilst hiking. I've met people who've shared their food and campfire with me, and some even hiked with me in the gorgeous wilderness we call the woods. But most of the time, it's your animal friends who accompany you while you're walking and camping. I wish this story was about all of the above, but things took a plummet for the worst, and this is my story. I had recently completed an assignment which I would like to describe as long-winded and quite boring, even though it was my favorite topic, human biology. Due to this, I decided to take a 5-day hike across a vast stretch of woods, brilliant for hunting apparently. As a hunting enthusiast, I decided to hunt for some deer and possibly some boars if I came across any, so I prepped up my water filter, packed my tranquilizer and hunting equipment, as well as my pop-up tent and some snacks high in energy, and took the 3.5-hour drive to my destination. I was stoked and excited, as I loved camping and hunting, as I could unwind around nature and overall enjoy the set atmosphere the woods provided. After what seemed like days behind the wheel, I arrived at what looked like an abandoned parking lot at 3:30 p.m. As all the bays were empty and the ranger's office looked as if it hadn't been occupied for years. But I brushed it off, parked up, and began my hike. The place gave me a very uneasy vibe, as if the woods beyond the ranger's office was sinister in a way. I can't really describe what gave me this uneasiness, but I honestly chalked it up to the place looking abandoned and creepy. Either way, I headed out onto the path and began scouting the area for animals. I've got to be honest, this set of woods was exquisite. The sun was shining through the trees, and the animals were up and active, and I came across a few deer, but no boars unfortunately. Fast forward to 8:30 p.m. It was uneventful, to be honest, and it was getting pretty dark and gloomy now, as it's mid-November. Now, I need to add that I'm quite a paranoid guy, as I was burglared at the age of 15, and all was okay in the end, but that paranoia of something or someone lurking in the shadows stays with me in the back of my mind when I'm out alone at night. Anyway, excuse the babbling. I then whipped up a fire, cooked up some marshmallows and warmed up some beans and ate away, minding my own business. After this, I decided to go for a late night hunt, as I did a 2-week course on how to hunt prey in the woods when it's dark, and I think it really paid off. 15 minutes later, I put the fire out as I was prepared to go on a late night hunt. But then my blood ran as cold as ice and my hands started to shake when I saw a silhouette of a person about 100 meters away from me. It was unexpected, so I internally freaked out. As well as this, I noticed a small pocket knife in their left hand, and it looked like they were crouching and stalking something, as they had their knife at the ready. I believe it was a man, about 6 feet tall, and his back was facing me, so I believed that he didn't notice I was there, which I took as a godsend. However, it could just be another hunter, like myself. After I was scared while watching this man for 5 minutes, he disappeared into the inky night, and I got over it pretty quickly, as I thought he was a fellow hunter like myself. I honestly wish that had been the case, but fast forward 1 hour, and it's around 9:45 p.m., and I'm feeling confident enough to go back out into the black wilderness and catch a deer or two, or maybe even a boar. I pinpointed where my tent was with a map and went on my way with my hunting equipment. 10 minutes later, I'm practically in no man's land, as everywhere around me was pitch black, but I knew what I was doing. I was stalking a deer which hadn't noticed me and was about 50 meters in front of me, plodding around the eerie woods. I grabbed my tranquilizer and placed the deer in my sights. That was when I heard twigs snap. My eyes darted. My legs went into jelly mode, and I jerked my neck to the source of the noise. What the? A silhouette appeared out of the tree to the left of me, about 50 yards away, and just watched me. Not the deer, but me. The deer was long gone now, so it was just me and an unwanted guest. His size concluded to me that he was the same guy as before, 6 feet, roughly 200 pounds. He stared at me, and I stared back. My body still as stone, but my sudden outburst of adrenaline was making me shake. I couldn't see his face, as it was too dark. What was he? A late-night human butcherer? Am I not going to see daylight again? I just about choked out. Who's there? I tried to say in the calmest voice I could, but fear was evident when I asked the question. The man raised the hand with his pocket knife and pointed his index finger towards me. That was it. I bolted it north, while smilingly tripping up and hitting my head off tree branches. Twigs snapped rapidly behind me as this guy was chasing me. I looked back once and saw his vacant right hand brushing tree branches to the side of him, his knife gripped tightly in his left hand. I then realized that, during it all, I dropped my tranquilizer. Forget it. I can buy another one. I know. I should have shot the guy, but it's amazing what one can forget when in a horrific situation, even if it's a gun. I wasn't going back for it. A ton of thoughts were going through my mind while I was fleeing. Why me? What does he want? Money? My food? What could it be? That was when I honestly thought I had urinated myself, as he then said in a rapid tone, "Isn't this fun?" He then had the audacity to start laughing in a patronizing way, and I couldn't take it anymore. I sped up, and I'll tell you now, it's amazing what the human body can do when adrenaline and natural instincts take over. I never ran so fast in my life. I made a hard right, dived into some bushes nearby quietly, and eventually lost the guy. I heard his footsteps go the opposite way, and it turns out that I went in a huge circle, as I could see my tent, only 50 meters from me now. I was shaking, and tears started to form, but I had to stay strong. I just had to. What would my father do in this situation? I tuned my ears into the inky darkness and heard nothing, and I saw nothing. I was not going to turn on my phone torch, as I'd be an open target for sure. I checked my watch and it was now 10:30 p.m. I've been in the tent for 10 minutes now. I sat still in my tent, listening to every small noise I could hear in the woods. Snap! I held in my gasp as I heard a twig snap behind my tent, and with that accompanied a low and sinister voice. "You think you could run? I win." With that, my tent was being sliced open and the guy popped his head in. He was licking his lips and his wide eyes locked with my eyes. "You lose," he screams as he pulls the knife out. Fighting. Not my strong point, but the gym made me a pretty strong guy. So as he tried to stab me, I grabbed both his arms and fended him off from plunging a blade into my torso. I tried to disarm the guy, and he laughed during the process. I thought he was going to intimidate me. However, I was ready to kill. Not a deer, not a boar, but a human. I restrained his left wrist, but his knife was inches away from going into my foot, so I stepped down to his right hand, pulled back on his left wrist, then snap. His left wrist snapped, and he let out a blood-curdling scream. I had the upper hand, and I took advantage of this. I got the knife from his distorted, shattered hand and gave him a taste of his own medicine. I sunk the knife into his right hand, and he screamed. I lay a few punches, and I think I popped his nose, but I had no regrets. I grabbed my arm in pain, as he made me bend it in an awkward position when he was on top of me when he first ripped the tent open. But I honestly couldn't care about my injuries. He tried to kick me, but I punched him in the face until he was unconscious. I checked my phone and I had no phone service. Oh, I panted. I picked up this man into a fireman's lift, and I remembered my way to the ranger's office, as it was exactly west from my tent. After an hour of struggling with a killer on my shoulders out cold, I found the ranger station, and to my surprise, a young man, around 20, was there. I collapsed to my knees as I explained the situation. As it turns out, the guy slashed my left bicep, but the adrenaline numbed out the pain. So when it wore off, I suddenly was in pain and noticed the laceration. The ranger called for backup, and they eventually arrived. I don't know how long it took. Forget my belongings. I was not going back out there to retrieve them. The ranger offered to drive me to the nearest hospital in my car, and I did. The night stalker was taken away, but was semi-conscious. The next day I woke up in a hospital bed to an officer, and what he said next was burned into my memory, never to be erased. When I first saw the killer, his back was towards me, knife in his left hand, and was crouching as I mentioned earlier. It turns out that he was stalking another hiker, who he brutally murdered and mutilated at the scene. They found chloroform at the scene, hence me not hearing any screams or cries for help. I vowed from there onwards to never go hunting again by myself. The next time I went hunting was half a year after this incident with 4 other mates. And although the woods has a beautiful atmosphere and vibe, never judge a book by its cover, as the tables can turn within the blink of an eye. For all of you going camping and hunting, stay safe, and remember, don't think that these things can't happen to you. This happened to me one crisp autumn morning while I was walking to my bus stop when I was a freshman in high school. I played the cello, and still do, and my school orchestra had signed up to play in a local school orchestra festival that day, so I was a bit dolled up with makeup, a nice twisted hairdo, a floor-length black dress, and a pair of shiny flat black suede shoes. I decided not to take my cello and use my school's cello instead to avoid the risk of damage and theft. Well, it turns out that day, my cello wasn't the only thing I needed to worry about being damaged or stolen. I said goodbye to my family as I rushed out the door, binder in arm and backpack in tow. When I got past the edge of my lot, a white unmarked delivery van without a license plate drove past me and slowed down for a moment, as if the driver was looking at something. Warily, I quickened my pace as I watched the van drive to the end of my cul-de-sac and turn around. I noticed that the van was hanging back a ways and going very slowly. I thought, okay, this is creepy, and walked even faster. Then, the unthinkable happened. I tripped over my dress and my binder went flying out in front of me, spilling some of its contents. I heard the van speed up behind me as I scrambled to pick everything up with my bloody hands and run away, but it was too late. The van had caught up to me. The driver opened his window. "Are you okay? Do you need a ride to school?" he said. He looked to be about 35 to 40 years old, had ear-length reddish-brown hair, brown eyes, and a skinny build. His eyes were bloodshot, and his movements were very fast, as if he was tweaking out on some sort of stimulant. "I'm fine," I said. "Just leave me alone." "Are you sure you don't want to ride?" he called as I walked away. "Yes, I'm sure. Now stop bothering me before I call the police," I explained as I tried to run away. Thankfully, my dad's friend was working in his front yard and came to my aid when he realized that I was in trouble. The creep tried to convince him that he was just trying to help me, but seeing how distressed I was and the fact that he kept following me put up his red flags, and he didn't buy it. My dad's friend told me to run inside and get washed up while he called the police. As I did so, the creep tried to get out of his van when my dad's friend slammed the door shut, saying, "If you get out of this van and you try to hurt that girl, I will beat you. You need to leave, now." I told my dad's friend that I still wanted to catch the bus, thinking that being among friends would help me calm down. So he agreed to watch over me until the bus got there. There was one other girl at the stop, and that was of some comfort, but the creep had the nerve to come back. When he drove by the second time, I ran for the nearest ditch and started sobbing. I was scared for my life. I had previously been in a 6.8 magnitude earthquake, and this experience was 10 times scarier than that. The other girl at the stop ran over to me, asking what was wrong, and I told her what had just happened. She's staying there with me until my dad's friend raced down there in his truck. We waited until the bus came to make sure that the other girl and the other students who came later got on the bus safely. Once I got to school, I told the campus police officer what happened and tearfully gave him the best description of the creep in his vehicle that I could. Thankfully, he was caught later that day while I was at school, and I thanked the campus police officer profusely for getting that search started. Turns out, the creep had been living in my neighborhood for about a year. He could have been watching me for that long, and I didn't even know it. This is an experience I would not wish on my worst enemy. For months afterwards, I was so afraid to walk by myself in my own neighborhood that my parents had to walk or drive me to my bus stop and wait for me because going by myself meant having flashbacks and embarrassing panic attacks. This creep may have not taken me, but he took away my ability to feel safe, and it took me a long time to gain that back. To the creep who did this to me, why? For some reason, I'm a person that attracts weirdos. I'm really cute, or so I've been told, and I'm very nice to people. Also awkward in an adorable type of way. Unfortunately, despite all of those qualities, the crazies are always drawn to me. The story is not so much scary as it is creepy. I just want people to be aware of their surroundings and be careful judging a book by its cover. Actually, my day started off normal enough. My normal weekend routine went according to plan. Only this day I met a seemingly nice guy who really seemed to have everything going for himself. It was a Saturday afternoon and I was jogging in the park in my neighborhood. As I came around the bend of the street that neared my house, there he stood, this gorgeous man. He looked like he had just stepped out of GQ magazine, nice suit and tie, dressed to the nines, all that. He smiled and said hi to me, and then proceeded to tell me how cute I was and asked for my number. Honestly, I was shocked that such a hot guy would be interested in me. I was in my yoga tank and shorts, hair tied back, no makeup, sweaty from the jog, etc. But no alarm bells went off yet. Anyway, I obliged, gave him my number and got his, then went on my way. Within a few seconds of getting into my doorway, my phone went off. It was him texting me. I found it odd that he would be texting so quickly, but I brushed it off as nerves maybe and sent emojis back. I thought nothing else of it for the rest of the day. I turned my cell phone off and proceeded to take a nap. This is when another alarm should have gone off in my head, but I let it slide yet again. When I turned on my cell phone after I woke up, there were countless texts, calls, and voice messages from the guy asking why I didn't answer his texts and calls. I found this very strange to be hounding someone you just met hours earlier, as if you two were already in a relationship, so I called him and told him if he didn't chill out, he should lose my number. He apologized and said it would never happen again. He then proceeded to ask me out on a date. I accepted it, thinking what harm could come out of this, going out for dinner and getting to know one another. Fast forward to date night. I find out a lot about him, like his prestigious educational background and his family's social standing. Let's just say they're a very prominent group of people. I was intrigued, and everything seemed to be going fine. That is until he started mumbling to himself at first. I thought it was just me overthinking things, but when he started to answer his own questions, I got freaked out. While he continued to mumble to himself, I interjected, "Hey, is there anything you'd like to talk about?" He replied firmly, "No." Well, at this moment I knew that this would be our first and last date, and I suddenly understood why a handsome man from a well-to-do family was still single. It was clear that he has mental issues that need to be addressed by a mental health care professional. It was also clear to me that I would not be seeing him again for any more dates. For some reason, I really can't pinpoint how, but it seemed clear to him as well. So we ate our dinner, the rest of the date went on in complete silence, and we went our separate ways. Or so I thought. A couple weeks went by, and I was relieved that he hadn't contacted me, and I was thinking it was very obvious that the first date was horrible and unnerving, but that was why we would never see each other again. I mean, I wasn't ghosting, but there was really nothing further to discuss at this point. There wasn't going to be any more dates or any more interaction for that matter. I was wrong. A couple Saturdays later, I was on my usual jog path, and guess who else was there this time in workout gear, smiling from ear to ear, running towards me? None other than Prince Charming himself. I was mortified. "Hey, you!" he exclaimed with excitement. "Oh, hi. How are you?" I answered uneasily. He replied, "Okay, just thinking about you and our future together." I was at a loss of words at this point, and then it dawned on me that if I didn't make my point clear that I wasn't interested in him, that this sort of thing will continue to go on, because he is not catching the non-communication hint. So I said, "Look, you're a nice guy, but I don't think you're the guy for me. I wish you the best in life. Good luck." Well, he said he understood and kept on with his run as I proceeded to head home. I truly thought that that was the end of it. But after another week passed, he began sending me texts again, manically, back to back, begging and pleading for another date, because he knew I was the one, and how his family wanted him to settle down and get married soon, and how he'd surely die without me. I didn't answer. I just blocked his number. Now I was just over with this nonsense at this point. The next week, my family went on our annual camping trip. This is when things got real. He starts calling me from random numbers saying he knows where I am and he was watching me. Initially, I shrugged it off, but then he told me what state my family and I were camping in. I freaked out, because I hadn't told him any of this. He proceeded to tell me how anything could happen to me or my family because of how powerful and connected his family was and how they just make people disappear. I told him to F off and leave me alone, but to no avail. The harassment continued off and on for another month. During that time, whenever I would leave the house to go to work, run errands, or just get out, I would notice his car parked across the street from my house, just watching me. I never told him where I lived. We'd only been on one date. I was in a lot of distress, barely sleeping because every little sound I would hear in the night, I would think it was him trying to break into my house. I tried to remain vigilant and undaunted in his presence because I didn't want him to think I was afraid of him and his antics. He knew everything about me, things we had never discussed, and continued to threaten bodily harm if he didn't get his way. I stayed steadfast, but finally decided to tell my best friend who was in the military and works in law enforcement about the ordeal just to get some insight on my legal options and to see if I could get any help. My best friend asked for his name. I'd only remembered his first name. I forgot his last name. The stress of it all had taken its toll, so we traced him by his phone number, many of which these numbers were actually registered to him or his close family members. I don't know what my best friend did or said, but I haven't had any more of these terrifying ordeals happen. I am grateful he didn't follow through with his threats to harm me. I learned my lesson. Just because someone is drop dead gorgeous doesn't mean they can't be crazy. This was in January of 2016. I'd gone up to a shopping center that is only about a 30-minute walk from my house. I'd taken the bus up there, but it only stops at the shopping center once an hour. While I would usually take the bus home from the shopping center near my house, the bus wasn't due for another 45 minutes by the time I had done what I needed to, and my 10-year-old brother was at home alone. My mom has no problem with me leaving my brother home alone for an hour or two, because he could take care of himself for that long. So I decided to walk back to my house, instead of waiting basically an hour for the bus. On the way home, I saw a man, maybe 40 to 45 years old, walking in the opposite direction to me. I was walking south and he was walking north. As he turned the corner to walk towards me, I got the impression that he didn't look right. Probably because as he was walking, he was just staring at me. As he walked past me, I got a sinking feeling, like when you're on a plane and it starts to descend. As I continued to walk, I felt like someone was following me. So when I got to the bus stop, I made it look like I was checking the bus times, which gave me an excuse to turn around. And once I did, my heart started racing. This person had changed directions and turned 180 degrees to walk in the same direction as me. He was walking faster than he was before, and this freaked me out. I was close to the road that I would usually turn up to get to my street. I turned up the street and had walked about 25 meters up when I heard crunching of a chipped packet that I knew I had just passed. He was still behind me. I decided I'd cross the road to put more distance between us and to also get to the street that was across from me. From here, I could go a longer way home. This longer way home had a lot of corners, making following me a lot harder to do. The street also had a lot of teenagers who were at home, due to it being the summer holidays, so if the guy tried anything, there were a lot of people who would likely hear me screaming. Now you may be wondering, why didn't you call the police? Well, I'd been stupid and left my phone at my house, so I had no chance of calling the police while walking. Even if I did have my phone, I probably wouldn't have called out of fear of provoking something. I'm about 172 centimeters and weigh 64 kilograms, while my weight is mostly muscle. I'm not large enough to take on someone who's 2 meters tall and look like they weighed twice what I did. So I was going along the long route when I turned to look behind me. He was still there. This is where I started my plan to get back to my house. I turned the next corner and sprinted along the path as quietly as I could. I was on my house's street. If I was going straight home, I would have gone left, but I went straight ahead towards a smallish park that was just up the street from my house. The reason I did this was because I could go up through the park and around to get to my house. As I was crossing the road to get to the park, I looked back and I saw him jogging up the path I'd just come from. He saw me and started sprinting towards me. Luckily, I had a 150-meter head start. I ran through the park, up and around to the left. The area behind the park is like a maze, so this gave me an advantage. Once I was behind the park and out of his sight, I continued sprinting for a house that had an old shed in its front yard. The shed was empty, and the door was open as always, so I hid in there, able to look out through a mirrored window, and he was looking around for me. He then walked the way that I was planning on going to get to my house. I was still too scared to leave the shed, so I waited for about 10 minutes before I saw him walking back towards the park on his phone, and I heard part of what he was saying to the other end. Yeah, I lost her, but I think she lives around here. She's crafty though. After he passed, I waited another 10 minutes before leaving the shed and sprinting towards my house. I called my mom, who called the police, who in turn called me. I gave a description of the man and refused to leave the house alone for a week. I've never seen him again, and the police report, unfortunately, hasn't come up with anything.